Star Trek Into Darkness, which is the sequel to Star Trek 2009, the reboot of the Star Trek series of films that we're getting from J.J. Abrams. This movie was also directed by J.J. Abrams,
Correct.
Surprisingly. I think he fought pretty hard and didn't want to do a sequel, but I don't think they had anybody else to do it, and he just kind of fell into it. Same cast. The only thing we're adding is Alice Eve, who plays Carol Marcus in the film, and fucking RoboCop is in this goddamn movie.
New villain too.
Peter Weller, as the Admiral Marcus, and of course Benedict Cumberbatch, or if you're a fan of him, you're a Benedict Cumberbitch, I believe is what they refer to them as. Who plays, the movie's been out long enough and it was spoiled beforehand. So he plays Khan in the movie.
Everyone
I'm not going
knows.
to bother with the James Madison or whatever that his name was.
Remember.
James something. All right, well, this is the first time, so Eric never saw this one before. This is why we're doing this, really, to catch him up, do a little bit of a review on it. And Eric, what did you think of Into Darkness? And feel free to compare it to the first one all you want, or Wrath of Khan.
I guess I'll do that. I'll say that I almost like this one better than the 2009. Yes and no. There's, I would say that they up the action in this, and it's all really good. Just the opening scene is a great action scene. It also looks really cool with the whole red forest. That was just looked really cool.
The movie opens beautifully. It opens better than the first one, I think, by far.
True, yeah.
But we also know our characters, so it's a little different.
So that helps a lot. I also really like how they build the Spock and Uhura relationship, but the problem is that I'll go into that later.
Yeah.
That I liked. I loved the villain in this movie. Benedict Cumberbatch as Khan was great. He was cunning, intelligent, and strategic. He is threatening both mentally and physically.
Yes.
And the fact that he believes that what he's doing is the just and the right thing to do makes him an even more complex villain. So yes, this movie takes the villain up, 10 notches, and which is why I wanted to rate this movie better. But we'll go into that when we go into the negatives. You?
Yeah. Well, I love this movie too. When it first came out, it got a little bit more backlash. I mean, it's like a 73% or something on Rotten Tomatoes, so it's not. It's fresh. It's good. But I love this movie just as much as the first one, if not more, for those little strengths. Like, because we're introduced to the characters now, we have this awesome opening. All the really nerdy Star Trek stuff aside, with they're violating the Prime Directive by merely even being on the planet because it is supposed to be a survey mission and that kind of thing. These are things Kirk in Picard, the captains did all the time. That was part of the fun and the complexity of Star Trek, is that, there's all these rules, but they break them constantly, and that was the fun of the show. Where does the conflict come from if the show is just them flying over planets and going, it's a Class M planet, it's got trees and forests and an electromagnetic field as strong as the Earth? How boring is that, right? So, I love those kind of things about it, just in general. But, I put it right up there with the reboot because, I just get to have another really fun adventure with these characters. What I like about this plot is it's as convoluted as a plot can be without actually being convoluted.
Yeah.
They run that complexity all the way up to the wall and stop right beforehand. So there's some issues with the movie, of course. This one is, the funny thing is I like it just as much, but I can acknowledge the flaws of this film a little bit more than I can acknowledge the flaws in the first one, because I believe there are a few more flaws in this film. But just overall, if I gave the first one a 9.5 out of 10, I give this one a 9.3 out of 10. It is almost there. And you get a second villain in this movie, too, that you don't really get in the first one, where the first villain is the first movie, the villain is Eric Bana's character, Nero, and just the ticking clock that they're up against. And the villain in this movie, you get the kind of sub-villain of Admiral Marcus, and then who's really doing the whole thing, but he's really not the big villain because of Khan. So, but just in general, great back to the cast again. Everybody's very good in the movie. Like I said, it's the convoluted thing that I love about it, is you run that plot all the way to the wall, where if there was one more mystery thing happening in the background, the movie kind of could have fallen away. But, they got across everything very well, I think. especially to make it a little bit better than the first one. There's a little more things going on, but not enough to like make your brain explode and go, oh man, they just did too much in the sequel.
Right.
So
I was able to follow it. So
exactly, yeah. So, what do you think positives wise? You said you liked the action in the movie. The set pieces were a bit more fun.
They were all good.
I really like I said, that opening scene. That visually, I think Abrams did even better. I couldn't even imagine in my entire life the Enterprise coming out of the ocean like that. Just things that as a kid you imagine and you're like, oh man, I love this. It's like a fan thing, where everyone says like, oh, it's just a fan film. Well, I always wanted to break this one down, and we'll do it here, and maybe I'll make another video about it. Every movie ever is a fan film, okay? The reason that people make movies is because they were fans of other people's movies, and then they wanted to write movies like the other person because they were fans. So I know when we talk about some of these movies, someone will look at this movie and go, well, it's basically just Wrath of Khan. This movie is nothing like Wrath of Khan. They took Khan as a villain and put him in the movie, but that's it. That's really the only time thing it has, until the end.
Right.
But we'll talk a little bit more about that as we kind of move through. But the addition of Alice Eve as Carol Marcus, I love that. Don't see her as she's going to be in Beyond, so that kind of sucks. But, I really thought they were going to do something with that. And then, just Benedict Cumberbatch is just...
He's the best character in this.
He freaking nails it. I mean, he's got like 23 lines, and he's in the movie for 19 minutes out of the whole 2 hours, but it's the best 20 minutes of the movie by far. So...
For sure.
Yeah. What else you got about Into Darkness? I mean, it's your first time, so you can get some more thoughts on it. Yeah. Seen the movie 15 times.
Yeah, just like we were just saying, like the villain is just so well done, and the characters, you get to see them interact with more with one another.
Yeah.
We do get a little bit more of Bones in this, I think.
Yeah, just about. You can get about the same of Bones. You get a little more dramatic stuff.
He gets a few more comedic scenes as well with the girl character you were just talking about.
Yeah, Carol Marcus and Alice Eve's character. Yeah.
Scenes with her are pretty well done. I like that. I'm trying to think of what else I just liked in this movie. Just again, action was great. Special effects wise was great. It looked fantastic. Negative wise, I will go back into that relationship. They start it, and they start to build conflict with it, but then towards the second half, they just sort of push it aside and don't really do anything with it. It's just kind of like they're all content with it, and
everyone's like, it's cool.
Yeah, it just doesn't evolve into anything, doesn't develop into anything. So that was a little bit of a misstep, in my opinion.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, it's unfortunate because, as a fan of Wrath of Khan, knowing that the Carol Marcus character is the father of David Marcus, I mean, his name is not David Kirk, obviously, in Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock, then I thought, oh, this is great. They're introducing Carol Marcus. They're going to fall in love by the end of the movie, and that doesn't happen. And I really don't know why, other than I have read interviews with J.J. Abrams that have said, because they wanted to do the sequel so quickly, he really didn't get the opportunity to sit down and really hash out the plot a little bit more. It was written by basically the same people. It's Alex Kurtzman, Robert Orci, and this time they added David Lindelof. So these are the guys who wrote basically every episode of Lost. If you've seen that TV show. So, I feel like like in Lost, they do a lot of these, coming up with these great ideas, and then they never really finish those ideas off, which is one of the flaws of this movie. They do set up the Marcus subplot and then do absolutely nothing with it. They set up the Klingon subplot and then do absolutely nothing with it other than just one big action scene, because it's like, oh, well, Klingons, So this movie, as good as it is, does suffer from, oh my God, we got to pile all this stuff in here because we're going to make 5 more of these, so we just, get it in there. But I don't think that interrupts the flow of the movie. So when you're watching it, it flows really well up until a certain point, which we'll talk about in a second. But, the movie just kind of floats right across. You got your good set piece, and then we calm down the action. It's a very good summer blockbuster, hit you can watch, have fun with, popcorn movie, but it's not Independence Day stupid level of popcorn.
Right.
There's some more intelligence.
Some intelligence,
yeah, there's more intelligence in this movie than a movie like that, which I really like about it.
There's also just real characters in it too, not just stereotypes.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's the strengths of the film, but it does suffer from that exact thing, which is, all right, well, Carol Marcus was in Wrath of Khan, so put her in this movie. She doesn't need to be there, anything like that. There's that scene with Spock that'll always drive me crazy. I think Spock was integral for the first film. You had to have him there because that's what made the time passage make sense.
Leonard
That's
Nimoy's what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, yeah, Leonard Nimoy. Yeah,
Yeah,
so Spock,
that
yeah,
one.
Mr. Spock. Yeah, it's tough because it's two Spocks now. But yeah, so you put Nimoy in the first film, it totally makes sense for him to be there. You put Nimoy in the second film, why?
It's shoehorned in there. There's not a point.
Yeah, so there are some big fat spoonfuls of shoehorn nonsense in this movie, but like I said, that doesn't interrupt the flow of the film. Where I feel like a movie like Avengers: Age of Ultron, some of the subplots that they throw in a movie like that kind of slowed the film down to a crawl at certain points. You know, all of a sudden Thor's in a bathtub all naked and getting electrified.
That's the one problem with that movie.
Yeah, so, you know, that doesn't really happen in this movie. But the Spock, him calling Spock calling older Spock in this movie and saying, have you ever met Khan before? What kind of person is? And then he literally says, which it's almost laughable out loud.
Yeah.
But he literally is like, look, I swore to God I was never going to tell you about your past.
But I'm going to tell you anyway.
But fuck it. I'm going to tell you anyway. And so I feel like if that wasn't in the movie, it's a better movie. I feel if you take Carol Marcus out of the movie, it's a better movie. And then we'll discuss the ending a little bit, which, you know, go for it, because I know you had some feelings about, you know, it's your first time, so we hit this great scene where we've won the day.
Right.
Khan is destroyed. We've taken the big dreadnought down. The ship is literally crashing. We're about to see that on the screen behind us momentarily.
And that's where it should have ended.
And then the movie should have been like them arresting Khan or killing him or something like that. But we have, you know, this one more kind of the third 0.5 act problem. So go ahead and talk about that a little bit.
Well, I'm not as emotionally angry about it as like most Star Trek fans probably are.
Like lost their minds. Which I have an explanation for it. So
I'm annoyed by it just because I've seen Wrath of Khan and I just know that they're just, you know, troping the ending to Wrath of Khan and just, you know, switching Spock and Kirk.
Yeah.
And it's just annoying that how they did that, you know, and it just, I don't understand why they did that. You're changing so much already, and then that's the part you're going to, you know, rehash the most, you know, sort of iconic moment in Star Trek films, really, I would say.
Yeah.
And then the fact that they do that, and the fact that it just sort of drags on at the end. The last, you know, 20 minutes of this movie just drags.
You hit that emotional peak, and then you're like, cool, I am ready for the epilogue and the credits, and I want to go home now because I am emotionally spent. And then we continue the movie.
Like the fact that it's dragging, the fact that it's dragging, and you're doing that whole rehash part. It's just sort of like, why? That was a huge mistake, in my opinion. I'm not angry about it or anything like that because I have no emotional ties to Star Trek, but I'm just sort of annoyed by it as a film fan. So
yeah, so like, and then I can get over that. You know, I like the fact that they didn't. If they were gonna rehash it, they didn't put Spock in the thing and have him die and have Kirk be, you know, the one that does that. So like, that's one of the scenes I can kind of get over. But I feel like it's the scene afterwards that really drags on, which is the chase scene.
Okay.
And then a lot of people are complaining. I'm saying this like we're doing this movie review in 2013 or whatever when this movie came out, but it's not the case. But when the movie came out, I had a few read reviews and things where people were, the worst part is, you know, like, why is Spock the one punching someone in the face at the end of the movie? He's Spock. So if you're a Star Trek fan, you know that Spock wouldn't do that. He'd just walk up behind you, he'd pinch you, you're gone. I know it's Khan, he tried to pinch him. It doesn't work because he's Khan. He's like way too strong for that kind of thing. But I like
that. I like that it's, you know, I like that part that they switch, but I don't like
the other part.
So
and the reason that I like it is because they do set it up. You know, they explain Spock. You got to remember, you know, once the timeline, the Kelvin timeline, as it's now so been dubbed, splits off from the original series line of stories, that Spock is much more emotional and has way less control over his emotions than he did as Spock, played by Leonard Nimoy. So if you watch the first Star Trek, the Vulcans pick on him at school, and he beats the shit out of that Vulcan. You know, he's like wailing on the ground, like just, you know, that double swingy punch when you're like 8 and you have no idea what you're really doing to somebody. And then he does it later on in that movie, and then, because he beats Kirk up in the first Star Trek, too, and he gets him emotionally compromised.
Because he is half human.
Yeah.
Is he a half human, half Vulcan in the original?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay.
But they like, play it up so he, he's pretty much dropped his emotional side.
Okay.
But so, when he's fighting Khan at the end of this movie, and he's just wailing on him until, Zoe Saldana is like, stop, we need him alive.
Right.
That totally makes sense to me because his character was set up to be that much more emotional because he has less control over his emotions.
Right.
And obviously he's like dating Uhura in this movie, and Spock, there was really nothing ever like that in the movie's original series before. Kirk was always with the ladies like Pine is in the movie, but... so I just, always wanted to offer that out there for the people who are like, it doesn't make any sense that Spock's punching someone. It totally makes sense. Watch the movies.
They built him up to that moment from the beginning. Yeah, they built him
up to that moment through both movies.
And he has a couple badass moments, leading up to that, too.
Exactly. And the other thing I really like about the very, very end of this movie is finally Quinto Spock, calls Chris Pine's Kirk Jim, which happens in Star Trek.
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, so like I noticed as a big Star Trek fan, he's always Jim. And then in Search for Spock, Spock dies at the end of Wrath of Khan, and then he comes back in Search for Spock. And then in The Voyage Home in Star Trek 4, Spock is still mentally just not there yet. He's still trying to remember everything about his life. And there's scenes in that movie where he's like, Admiral, we should do this. And he's like, stop calling me Admiral. You used to call me Jim. Remember, we were friends. You called me Jim. So at the end of that movie, when he's like, we saved your life, Jim, I'm like, yeah, he finally called him Jim, which means in Star Trek Beyond, he's going to call him Jim the whole time. I'm not going to have to hear Captain anymore out of Zachary Quinto. I finally heard the word fucking Jim out of him for the rest of the movie, so that's just a nerdy rant for me, but I love that about those characters. The Jim thing will always make me happy, so. But yeah, Star Trek Into Darkness. Once again, if I gave Star Trek a 9.5, this movie's a 9.3. Okay. You can really kind of flip over a lot of those flaws and, roll right by.
It's the fact that the strengths are so good, you're able to overlook the flaws, but again, once it gets into that ending, it's like,
yeah. Some people, it's a half and half. I think that's like the thing that splits everyone in half about this movie. At that point, I was literally, the first time I saw this in the theater, I was crying. I audibly let out like a whelp like that when I saw this movie because I was just so tied to these characters since I was like 5 years old, I've been in love with these characters, so... I have friends who watched it in the theater and groaned at it. I mean, literally, like, someone next to me was like, oh, really, they're doing this? And I'm like, oh my God, they're doing this? So that moment completely splits people in half, but, I'm happy for it, so.
Cool.
All right. There we go. So there's a little intro to Star Trek. Beyond's coming out in a couple days, so we're going to get on that and give you guys a review for that. We really appreciate everybody who stuck through this whole thing. I'll probably split it into 2 vids anyway, just to make it a little bit easier to digest. So,
you going for a while?
Yeah. So, thank you everybody for watching Mass Media Galaxy again. My name is Brandon.
I'm Eric.
And we hope to see you soon. Thanks for watching.